Welcome to my weekly market update. Today, I've got a couple of huge topics for you. The first one is going to be income limits have been published for 2024. So what are they? What do they mean? I'm going to explain everything you need to know about that. The second thing I'm going to talk about, how to buy a foreclosure. I think this is a really important topic. I'm getting a lot of questions lately about it because here's the truth. House prices are high and you have a choice. You can wait until interest rates fall, but you're going to end up paying higher price for a house. And I've talked about that many, many times and why that's going to happen. So I've had a lot of people lately who have been asking me, John, can I just buy a foreclosed home? Can I get a deal on a foreclosed home? And what's that going to look like? So I'm going to cover that for you today. So I just want to say thank you and welcome to my weekly market update. So every single week on Friday morning, you're going to get an update from me on what's happening that week, new information, changes, and just kind of the happenings in the market. So first of all, as far as rates are concerned, there's really been no change. We saw a downward movement last week because of the jobs report. We're really in a holding pattern until the inflation reports come out later this month. But in general, we're in decent shape right now, moving the right direction. But rates are still a lot higher than anybody wants them to be. It's just going to take some time for this to ferret itself out. The Fed has certainly made it clear they're not going to jump to a conclusion and moving rates down too quickly. They're also not going to jump to any conclusion in raising rates. I think we're in a holding pattern for a little while, and rates are going to stay about where they're at. Anybody who was waiting for Dream for All, if you didn't get the message, we're about a month away from getting the results of Dream for All. So if you are waiting, you got about a month, you got to wait longer, but keep checking your portal to see if they're asking for any additional information along the way. All right, so let's dive into what I want to talk about this week. First of all, new income limits. Now, what do income limits mean? Income limits apply for certain first-time homebuyer programs, certain down payment assistance programs, certain interest rates, discounts that you can get. So there's lots of things that have to do with income limits. And it all surrounds the thought of what is the area median income for the county that I am buying a home. And that area median income is determined by the federal government every year, and they publish those numbers in early May. Now, those numbers are put into effect at different times over the summer, depending upon the program that you are using and how that program looks at the numbers. So what does that ultimately mean? It depends. What you're ultimately going to get if you meet a threshold is you're going to get access to some programs. And each program has a different threshold. There's a program in California right now called the Housing Affordability Fund that gives you $10,000 towards your closing costs if you are under 120% of the area median income and you're a first-time home buyer and you're a member of an underserved community, such as someone who is 3 underserved communities, a person of color, a person with a physical, mental, or cognitive disability, or a person of the LGBTQ plus community. That's an example of a program that is tied to area median income that says in that case, you can't make over 120% of the area median income. There's other programs that are down payment assistance, like the Dream for All program, that is tied to a percentage of area median income. The question becomes, did the income limits change in your county? And when will the program you're trying to get change their numbers? And whether it changed in your county, I can tell you right now. But whether that program changed when they're going to change their numbers and what the effective date is, it's impossible to tell. So for a normal loan with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, it's going to be May 19th is the effective date. But things like CalHFA, they typically update their numbers in middle June to middle July. Now, I'm not sure when or if they're going to update the numbers for Dream for All, but I suspect they will. So especially those of you who are waiting on Dream for All vouchers, you want to pay attention because pay attention to the number. I'm not going to show you what the new loan limit is, but I'm going to show you the direction of the change because I believe that's going to impact you. So let's go ahead and dive into the numbers. So here's what we're looking at. These are all of the counties in California. This list, I can get counties outside of California, but I'm focusing right now just on California as an example. And so Alameda County, the income limit for 2024 is $166,000, where in 2023 it was $158,000. So that's an increase of $8,400 or 5%. But here's an example. Calaveras County went down. We lost $1,600. Now, again, most of these programs are a percentage of the area median income. So, for example, Los Angeles County for CalHFA, for the Dream for All program, says you can't make more than $155,000. Well, the area median income in 2023 was 105. And CalHFA basically is 150% of the area median income in general. And so that 105 turned into 155. Well, now it's 105,700. There's almost no change. So it's pretty much flat for that market. You need to really look to see which counties lost. And that's where we show the counties that had the biggest, that's fine, just fine. All right, the counties that had the biggest change are a lot of them in Northern California. So Nevada County had the biggest loss. Actually, Napa had the biggest dollar loss. So we had some pretty big drop, 7% drop. So if you are looking to qualify under Dream for All or any income restricted program, and you're in one of these counties that I'm showing you right here, Nevada, Napa, Santa Cruz, Imperial, so that's the one in Southern California, Calaveras, Stanislaus, Tuolumne, El Dorado, Placer, Sacramento, or Yolo, you're likely to see a decrease in the amount of income that you can earn to meet these programs. Well, that's a little worrisome for those of you who are looking at Dream for All, because you might get your voucher in mid-June, and your income is based upon the limit in effect when you go into contract, which means you might be in a position where your income was high, was right in line, but the income limit fell. So if you're in one of these counties, I think the income, especially if you're in one of these 5-6 counties, you're going to see a pretty decent drop because you had a pretty sizable decrease in the income limit. So just be prepared for that fact. Income limits are an important part of the calculation when it comes to lots of different loan programs. And I want you to understand that those numbers are changing. These are even programs that are grant programs like the WISH program, or San Diego County has a down payment assistance program. They're changing their limits effective June 1st. So there's lots of implications to this. I just wanted to share with you a general overview of how it works and what it looks like. All right, let's go on to my next topic. How to buy a foreclosure. This is a really, really big topic because, again, everybody out there is looking at how do I get a deal on a home? And you remember that people got a lot of great deals on homes back in 2007, 2008, 9, 10, because they bought a foreclosed home. And you can get a heck of a deal on a foreclosed home, or so you think. So you can buy a foreclosed home, and I'm going to educate you on how it works, and then I'll talk about whether you should or you shouldn't. So the first thing I want to explain to you is there's really two definitions of a foreclosure sale. The actual foreclosure sale in California specifically comes after the homeowner has been delinquent on their mortgage for a long enough time that the mortgage company has filed two documents. One's called a notice of default that says, hey, you are behind on your payment and we're going to take your home if you don't catch it up. Then the next one, a few months later, says notice of trustee sale, because we are a deed of trust state. And so the trustee sale says, we're going to sell your home. Here's the date and time it's going to be sold on the courthouse steps, because you're still the owner. The current person who had the mortgage, they still own the property. So the trustee says, we're going to sell the property, and the bank sets a minimum number. So what happens is, let's say the date is set, and this morning at 10 o'clock in the morning is the date that the home is being sold on the courthouse steps. Nobody had access to that property prior to that date. Nobody could walk in and do an inspection of that property, including you. No buyers. You have to buy sight unseen. You cannot do an inspection. You cannot do an appraisal. Once you go to the courthouse steps, you're going to bid. And you're going to say, I want, hey, that house, it's worth, I think, $800,000, but I kind of peeked through the windows a little bit, and I think there's some work that needs to be done. And so I think there's maybe $100,000 worth of work. And so I'm not willing to risk it. So I'm only going to offer $500,000 on this, which is fair because you're taking a huge risk. You don't know if there's other liens on title. If you didn't do your research, you don't get title insurance. You don't get an appraisal. You don't get an inspection. And so people are bidding pretty low. And if you win, in order to win, you have to be the highest bidder, and you have to bid higher than what the bank set as a minimum sales price. Now, you don't know that minimum price, but the bank might say, we're not letting this house go for less than $600,000, even though we think it's worth 800 too. Also, we're not going to let it go for less than 600,000. Well, you don't know that. So you might be the highest bidder at 500, but you still don't win. You still can't buy the home. So let's pretend the bank had said, hey, the minimum bid is 450 and you offered 500. Great, you're the winner. You have to pay them immediately. No joke. You literally have to pay immediately. So the people who buy at the courthouse steps are investors. They literally show up with cashier's checks written to the county in denominations that they can spend, kind of like you'd bring dollar bills of cash. So they've got $500,000 worth of $100,000 cashier's checks, 5 more $25,000 checks. You see where I'm coming from? Like you're pulling it out of your wallet, like you're pulling out $20 and $50 and $100 bills. They're buying the house literally in cash. Now let's be real. None of us are going to do that. None of us have the money to do it. None of us, at least the people that are my audience here, you're looking at, how do I get down payment assistance? How do I find a way? You can't get a mortgage. I can't help you because I have to get an appraisal done on that property. I have to make sure that there aren't any issues with that property. It's worth what you're paying for it, and that it doesn't have any health or safety hazards, and that it meets lending guidelines. We need at least 2 weeks from start to finish to close an escrow. You have an hour. So you cannot do that unless you have cash. So why are people saying I'm going to buy a foreclosure? Because it's the second type of foreclosure that they're talking about, which really isn't a foreclosure. It's a foreclosed home, past tense. That home was foreclosed upon, and it is now owned by the bank, or a bank-owned home. You'll also hear the term REO. That stands for real estate owned. An REO property is a bank-owned property, is a property that has been foreclosed upon, but either nobody bid on it or nobody bid high enough, and so the bank takes it back and they sell it. That, first of all, is the definition, that second definition, a bank-owned or REO. That's what most people are buying when they're saying, hey, I'm buying a foreclosure. That's what they're buying. Now, the good news is you have time now to do your inspections. You have time for me to get the appraisal done. You absolutely can buy those homes. The question is, are you getting a deal? And so that goes to kind of my final point here. Is it a good idea to buy a foreclosure, to buy that bank-owned home? Well, it depends. What you've got is you've got a seller that has no emotional attachment to the home. In a way, that's a good thing. If you think about negotiations, when you're negotiating with a seller that was born and raised in that house and has done all the work on it themselves, they have an emotional attachment to it. And if you go to that seller and you say, hey, you got your house listed for 650 grand, I don't think it's worth that. I'll offer you 600,000 instead of 650. They'll take it as an insult. How dare you only be willing to pay $600,000 when my house is better than all the rest of them on the market? And don't you dare compare it to my neighbor's house that sold last week, because even though that one sold for 600, mine is way better because I have all these flowers in the front yard that I planted by hand, and those are high quality flowers. But what they don't understand is that some upgrades you do to a home make a home more marketable, make it more desirable, but not more valuable. But a human seller has an emotional tie. And then on top of that, you might say, oh, by the way, I want you to pay $10,000 towards my closing costs. They're gonna say, oh my God, you want to lower the price by 50 grand and have me pay 10,000 towards your closing costs? No way, no way. And it ends up that 6 months later, they sell the house for $575. They would have been better off selling it to you for $600 with a $10,000 seller credit. The good news is when you buy a foreclosure, there's none of that emotional back and forth. The seller is a bank. They have no emotional tie to the home. They just want to get it sold. So if you negotiate with them, they don't care as long as the bottom line number gives them the most amount of money possible. But that's the key. They're looking for the most amount of money possible. They need to sell the home, but they don't want to give it away. And so they are going to market it on the open market. They're going to hire a real estate agent and have that real estate agent list their home for sale. And they're going to try and get as many offers as they possibly can. That's the key. So the bank is going to try and get as many offers as they possibly can. And then they're going to look for the best offer. They're not just going to give it away at a low price. Why did they do that back in 2007? Because they had 40 homes in every city that they had to sell. And they knew they couldn't sit and wait for the best price. They had to move that home because they knew that tomorrow another one was being foreclosed upon that they were going to have to sell. And so it was the volume, the number of foreclosed homes that drove the prices down on foreclosures. Now, there's a whole nother component to this, which is the condition of the property. Everybody, which is going to be a broken home, broken home has a different connotation. It's going to be a home that is in bad shape, that needs repairs. That actually isn't true a majority of the time. It was true a lot back in 07, 08, because they felt like a lot of homeowners felt like the bank screwed me and I'm going to screw the bank. I'm going to take this home and I'm going to ruin it for them. I'm going to take all the fixtures out and pull out all the copper wiring. I'm going to rip up the floors just for the fun of it. And I'm just going to make it horrible because that bank is not going to make a penny off of me. Well, that was kind of a movement. That was kind of a thought process for people that said, I got screwed by the bank and I'm screwing the bank over. People don't think that way now. The truth is there's very, very few homes actually being foreclosed upon. Why? Because people have a lot of equity. Now, you'd say in 2007, people had a lot of equity because prices went up a lot between 2000 and 2007, and they did. But prices started declining very, very quickly, and very quickly, a lot of people were underwater. It was a domino effect. What we're dealing with right now is we don't have that same domino effect. Back in 07, everybody had a variable rate mortgage. It expired in 2, 3, or 5 years. And so in that time, your interest rate and your payment went up. And you couldn't afford to keep your current loan, you had to refinance. The problem is your value had dropped a little bit, and it just dropped too much that you couldn't refinance anymore, and you can't afford to keep your monthly payment. So you had to let your home go, which caused the value to drop a little further. And then when your neighbor had to refinance, he couldn't because the value had dropped a little bit further because you lost your home, and it became a domino effect. That domino effect doesn't exist in today's market because everybody has a fixed rate mortgage. And so you have a fixed rate mortgage and you've gained a lot of equity. If you're behind on your payment, you're going to contact a realtor to sell the property because you have not lost, you have equity in that home. You might have bought it back in 2012 for $300,000 and it's now worth $600,000. So you're going to want to sell that house and get your $600,000, pay off $300,000 mortgage, and you still walk away with $300,000. If you let it go to foreclosure, the bank takes the home. The seller gets nothing, and the bank is owed $300,000, and they can turn around and sell the house for $550 because they're going to want to sell it for the most amount of money. And the current owner loses. The current owner, smart ones that are paying attention, won't let that happen. So there's a lot fewer homes going into foreclosure. So we don't have the bubble of foreclosures. And yes, at some point, we will see a recession. And with a recession comes job loss. With job loss comes that person's inability to make their monthly payment. And at some point, that person's going to get foreclosed upon, especially if they bought recently with a small down payment. That's just unfortunately the reality of the numbers. Somebody who bought 10 years ago, they got a bunch of equity. Somebody who bought recently with a small down payment, they have nothing in the home. They have no equity. They're going to let it go to foreclosure. That makes sense. So there are some. But these homeowners aren't spiteful in ruining the house. And so you're not going to end up with a house in really poor shape. The final thing I want to say about buying a foreclosure is if you do think I'm going to buy something in bad shape and I'm going to fix it up, I got 2 thoughts for you. First of all, the bank has to be okay with the current condition of the property. It has to be livable with no health or safety hazards. That's the first thing. The second thing, for those of you who are participating in the Dream for All program, you're now buying a house at a lower price. You're going to put in your sweat equity and your money to make that house worth more, and the state gets 20% of that increase. So just be aware of the fact that it may not actually behoove you to buy a home below market value when you're sharing with the state the amount of equity that your property is appreciating. Guys, I really appreciate you listening to me today. If you have any questions about buying a foreclosed home or anything else, please feel free to reach out to me. Hope everybody has an absolutely wonderful day, and we'll talk to y'all soon. Bye-bye.